The Atlanta Braves are set to take on the San Diego Padres in Game 1 of their 4-game series in Truist Park this week. Here's your 15-minute scouting report for today's game. Yes, welcome on into Braves Today, a production of the Belief Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. I'm Lindsey Crosby. In the next 15 minutes, we're breaking down everything you need to know before first pitch. Today, it's the Braves and the San Diego Padres in the series opener, so let's get into it. If you are going to be at the games this week, as always, you got to hydrate to be great, folks. It is going to be hot. Shout out to our friend at BravesWX on Twitter, on X, for the graphic and for the weather report. Odds are pretty good they're going to play today and tomorrow. Game 3 is really the one where you kind of have to worry. Going to be some scattered showers. It's going to be muggy. It's going to be warm. But high of 87 today. Wind shouldn't be much of a factor. Make sure you're wearing sunscreen. Thing I love, all 4 of these games are on Braves Vision. CJ Nikowski should be back in the booth along with Brandon Godden for the opener today. Both teams have put out their lineups for the game. For the Braves, with a lefty on the mound. On the other side, they're doing some of the usual adjustments that we see. Drake Baldwin still leading off, but at DH. Ozzie Albies bats second at second base. Matt Olson's in the 3-hole, playing first base. Austin Riley, who had 2 home runs yesterday, 3 over the weekend, moves to the cleanup spot at third base. Michael Harris is second in center field. He drops down 1 spot to make room for Riley. Mauricio Dubon batting 6th in left field. Joey Bart behind the plate batting 7th. Jim Jarvis at shortstop batting 8th. And Eli White in right field batting 9th. Part of the reason I believe, we haven't talked to Walt Weiss yet, part of the reason I believe that you're seeing Riley move up to the 4-hole is between the minors and the majors combined. Padre starter JP Sears has allowed righties to put up a 941 OPS. Lefties have only a 679. So Riley, Dubon, Bart, Eli White, all those guys look like they could have a good game against, or are set to have a good game against JP Sears. And then obviously Ozzie Albies is a switch hitter. But just something where you move a righty up in the lineup a little bit so you can get a little bit of a different look and take advantage of a vulnerability you see there against JP Sears. On the mound for the Braves, made the graphic today, Bryce Elder, 5-6, 4.12 ERA. The estimators kind of say that's the right range, right? Expected ERA of 3.81, fielded independent pitching of 4.32. Strikeout rate's just below 20%, which is obviously kind of what you hate here, 19.8%. Walk rate is 7.4%, better than league average. So that spread, that 12% spread, you'd love it to get to 15, but the lower strikeout rate is offset a little bit by a lower walk rate, okay? 5-pitch mix to both sides of the plate. Lefties are seeing 4-seamer, slider, cutter, sinker, change in that order. Righties are seeing a ton of sinker, slider. 83% between those 2 pitches, sinker and slider. He dabbles in with the 4-seamer. He dabbles in with the changeup. He dabbles in with the cutter. And a lot of the adjustments we've seen recently from Bryce Elder have been ramping up his sinker usage in the place of throwing that 4-seamer as much. I don't quite know if he doesn't feel confident in the fastball velocity on the 4-seamer or what it might be, but he's absolutely ramped up how much he's throwing the sinker, and he's cut back on the 4-seam usage. And he's also dramatically ramped up the cutter so far. And that's just a different adjustment than we were expecting, right? So some changes there for Elder. Obviously, thing to watch for with him is going to be the locations. He's been decent on walks this year. The mistakes that Bryce Elder is allowing typically come when a slider or a sinker catch too much of the zone, right? They're not in the bottom third or below. They kind of rise up to the middle of the plate. Or when he's trying to throw a cutter on one of the edges of the plate and it leaks back towards the middle. And the real key here for Elder to give you some length, which you need, we'll get to the bullpen in a minute, is being able to cut short an inning that's spiraling out of control. The bad version of Bryce Elder really struggled with that and would give up 4 or 5 runs in an inning. The good version of Elder that we've seen down the stretch last year and early this year would give up a run or two and be able to shut it down and get out of the inning. And I think if he can rediscover what he was doing to cut those outings short and get out of it, get that inning, get out of that inning, not the whole outing, get out of that inning, that would really help him be able to give the Braves length, which they sorely need. Only 8 San Diego hitters have faced him. He didn't face the Padres when we played them earlier in the year. So this is all from previous seasons. Jake Cronenworth, 1 for 3 with a homer and 3 RBI. The guy with the most success out of all of them, but none of them have really been like world beaters because they just haven't faced Bryce Elder a lot. It's like the most of them, the most at bats are 5 that anybody has against Bryce Elder on the Padres roster. Speaking of the Padres roster, their lineup is out. Fernando Tatis Jr., as usual, right field leading off. Jackson Merrill started off really slow, has been better recently. He is in center field batting second. Manny Machado at third base batting third. Ty France at first base batting cleanup. And you may be thinking that's a weird thing to do with Ty France. Last 7 games, he is 11 for 24 with 4 home runs and 9 RBI. He has, of those 11 hits, 7 have been for extra bases. He's on a heater. They're tapping into it by putting him at cleanup. Gavin Sheets in left field batting 5th. Xander Bogaerts gets a half day. He's a designated hitter and not shortstop, batting 6th. Jake Cronenworth, who I mentioned, has the homer off of Elder, batting 7th. Catcher Freddie Fermin behind the plate, batting 8th. And shortstop Sung Moon Song gets a start, obviously defensively in place of Xander Bogaerts, batting 9th. On the mound for the Padres, J.P. Sears, 2-2 with a 5.03 ERA in the 4 starts he's made this year. 5.39 expected ERA, 5.24 fielding independent pitching. So a little bit of a, small sample size, but so far he's kind of pitching to what you would expect and what you really are expecting to get out of a swingman, right? He was only called up when Lucas Giolito went on the IL. He's not one of their top 5 starters, and that's a season where they've struggled to find 5 consistent starters, right? But the first start that he made, unfortunately, if you remember, was against the Braves. And I believe he pitched 5 2/3, 2 runs, 5 strikeouts, 2 walks. Joey Bart took him deep, but otherwise it was just a bunch of singles. I think there was 1 double in that final inning, and then the Joey Bart homer is what knocked him out of the game. So there you go, but small sample size. He's been pretty good at not allowing walks, 6.2% walk rate, but strikeout rate of 20.1%, and overall just a lot of blue on the StatCast card. He's an extreme fly ball pitcher. You have to feel good for the Braves there. He doesn't give up as much hard hit contact as you would expect, but a lot of that is because it's a very decent arsenal as far as moving off of the barrel, right? A lot of lateral movement. Changeup is his number 2 pitch that he throws. He's got a sweeper as well. When you do some of these things, you end up with weaker contact, things like that. So I'll give him credit. He's not giving up a lot of contact on the barrel, but overall, not great at getting chase, not great at getting whiffs, but he did shut Atlanta down back in June, like a lot of teams did. Against lefties, so far in these 4 starts, it's a very simple mix. He's only throwing 4 pitches. Again, he's thrown 60 pitches total to lefties all year. So it's not like this is a massive sample size, but he's not using the full arsenal. Four-seam and sweeper makes up about 80% of the usage, but he does play around with it. He goes more like he cuts back on the 4-seamers early in the count, which is a little bit surprising. A lot of guys want to establish a fastball early. And then when he's ahead, that's where he ramps up the sweeper. When he's behind, that is four-seam slider, not four-seam sinker like you would think. A lot of guys throw a lot of sinkers when they're behind. He throws most of his sinkers early in the count and before he gets to 2 strikes. Again, when he's behind, it's four-seam slider. When he has those 2 strikes, it's four-seam and sweeper. Against righties, little bit more variable with this mix. He is throwing 6 pitches here, so including all 3 fastballs. You got to be ready for this. But similar to what he does against lefties, he cuts back on the four-seamers early in favor of sweepers. Super weird adjustment to make, to throw more sweepers against on the opposite handedness. That's an uncommon thing in baseball. Sweepers have the biggest platoon split of any individual pitch, because if you're a lefty and you're throwing a sweeper to a righty, it's breaking in towards their bats. Typically, most sweepers are reserved for the same-handed situations. Maybe that sweeper usage is part of the reason why he gives up a really high OPS to righties. It's entirely possible. When he's ahead in the count, this is where he restores the four-seamer to that 40% usage. He throws a lot of sliders in that situation and almost never throws that sweeper. So it's really just like a strike stealing, try to get back into the at-bat pitch on the sweeper, right? When he's behind, it's a lot of four-seam changeup. Again, he doesn't really go to the sinker a lot, which is weird to me. Four-seam changeup when he's behind. When he gets to 2 strikes, it's four-seam slider. So far this year, smaller sample size, 4 starts, he's not thrown a single sinker with 2 strikes, not a single one. So don't really know what to expect here other than the guys have seen him like 3 or 4 weeks ago. You would think, that they could be a little more successful this time than they were last time out. Mauricio Dubon has been pretty successful, right? 300 average, 900 OPS off of JP Sears in 20 at-bats. Matt Olson's 3 for 10 with an RBI. Joey Bart's 2 for 3 with that homer. Again, that all came in that last game Atlanta played against the Padres. Really weird stat line. I wanted to highlight. He's not in the lineup or anything, but Jorge Mateo is 1 for 14 off JP Sears in his career, but that one hit, it's a home run. So what a weird stat line. Thought it was fun to mention. Mateo's not in the lineup. Probably the last time we'll talk about him when it comes to the context of this game. You look at the bullpens for both teams. Atlanta's bullpen is in for it today. Victor Medeiros, Eliezer Hernandez, both those guys haven't thrown in a few days. That's nice. They can give you some length. You could possibly need that length because everybody else threw on Saturday or Sunday. J.R. Ritchie, Danny Young, Tyler Kinley. Those guys threw on Saturday and got Sunday off, right? But Dylan Lee, not only coming off a back-to-back, 45 pitches in that back-to-back. Dylan Dodd, back-to-back, 36 pitches. Both those guys are almost for certain down. Didier Fuentes, 27 pitches on a back-to-back. Only the second time all year they've used him on a back-to-back. So he's likely down as well. Raisel Iglesias pitched on Saturday and on Sunday, but threw a grand total of 16 pitches. Because of that, because the fact he's a closer and they have different rules, and because of the fact you don't really have anybody else available, I would imagine if Atlanta has a lead going into the 9th and it's a save situation, 1 run, 2 run, maybe 3, but they might just hold it to 1 or 2, they're probably going to go to Raisel Iglesias for a 3rd straight game. We've seen that a little bit. He did that some in 24. I want to say they didn't do it a lot last year. We didn't really have a lot of games where we were winning 3 straight games and could do that anyway. But you're probably, despite the fact coming off a back-to-back, you're probably still going to see Raisel Iglesias today. Simply because who else is going to close for you, right? You're going to ask Danny Young to close. You're going to ask Tyler Kinley to close. You're going to ask, J.R. Ritchie or Victor Medeiros. You're not. You're going to go to Raisel Iglesias on a 3rd straight game. That's my expectation. We've not heard anything out from Walt Weiss about that. But honestly, some length out of Bryce Elder sure would be nice. San Diego's bullpen in a much better situation, right? None of their leverage arms have thrown since Friday. They used Mason Miller. They used Adrian Morejon. They used Bradley Rodriguez. Those guys all threw on Friday. They've had 2 days off. They're good to go today. 2 lefties pitched on Sunday, Yuki Matsui and Wandy Peralta. I would imagine they're both fine. Matsui had 19 pitches. Peralta had 10. They're probably both good for today, honestly. 2 longmen. Randy Vasquez threw 32 pitches yesterday. They might not go to him if they don't need to. Matt Waldron, the knuckleballer, threw 27 on Saturday. If they need a longman today, they probably go to Waldron, but they may also try to piece it together. They may say, hey, Kyle Hart, can you give us 2 innings? And they kind of piece it in there. And if it's a big enough blowout, clearly they can just go to a position player. But their bullpen's in a much better place than Atlanta's is today. And the goal, obviously, not have to face Mason Miller. The goal is to not let them get to the 9th of the lead, so they're not going with Mason Miller. And thankfully, some of the guys that you worry about with this Padres bullpen outside of Mason Miller are not available. Jason Adams on the IL with a strained shoulder. Jeremiah Estrada's out with knee inflammation. They both went down in June. So it's not as deadly as it's been, but Adrian Morejon, Mason Miller, Bradley Rodriguez still a pretty good pen. So you've still got plenty of options there. Final thoughts on this one, as we've officially gone a minute and a half over the 15 minutes that I do for this. Braves are favored. Braves Today sponsor FanDuel has Atlanta favored in this one. It's a minus 134 on the money line. FanDuel predicts this to be over under of 9 runs. I don't know what to expect from Atlanta's offense. On the one hand, they weren't great against JP Sears in June. On the other hand, they weren't great against anybody in June. And they've looked much better in July. And when you look at the profile, what he does, yes, he's a kitchen sink guy. Yes, they've struggled with those a little bit. But the July offense feels like it can probably hit anybody pretty well. And so to me, this kind of comes down to, can Bryce Elder keep San Diego off the board, or at least keep their run total down enough and give Atlanta enough length where they can win tonight's game? That's the conversation on this one to me. I think they can. Braves Today sponsor FanDuel agrees with me. We'll see what happens. That's your Braves Today scouting report. If you want the deeper analysis, the lineup breakdowns, everything behind the numbers, make sure you're subscribed to Braves Today. Enjoy the game. We'll be back after it with the postcast over on Locked On Sports Atlanta. And today's 3 things are written game recap over at bravestoday.com.